At $200, a Super Nintendo setup costs twice as much as the old system. For the money, the company promises better pictures, sound, and adventure. Now you're playing with power, superpower. You're the king, I tell you! The king!
Only for Super NES.
Only on Super NES.
You're listening to the SNES podcast with your host, Soul Blazer.
Hello, everybody. This is the Super NES podcast, episode number 194. I'm Greg. He is Joe.
Hello.
We are your hosts on this podcast as usual. And this time around, we're looking at a game that I wanted to cover for about a year or two now, actually, at this point. But I just never got around to putting it like the rotation. So now I'm finally taking a look at it. We're looking at one of the more obscure and definitely one of the most expensive games ever released in the Super NES, Rendering Ranger R2, which is a Japanese-only action/shooter game. So, like I said before, this game came up some point when I was doing research in the past podcast, like rare and or expensive Super NES games. So, I mean, technically Super Famicom because I said this game was released in Japan only, but I'm just saying Super NES just to make things like uniform and easier for everybody to understand. So, anyway. Had you ever heard of this game, Joe, before I mentioned wanting to do it on the podcast?
Absolutely not.
Okay. But you usually like shooters, right?
Well, yeah,
like
I mean, I'm a run and gun guy, so yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so.
When you mentioned this game and I saw a quick video on it, I was like, oh, okay, this is up my alley.
Yeah. So, some background about this game before we get into the story, because believe me, there actually is a story to this one. There's actually quite a bit of a story for this game. Rendering Ranger R2 was developed by a guy named Manfred Trenz, who's a very famous German programmer. He's got numerous games, under his belt. He's probably best known for having. He's probably best known being the original creator of the Great Yana Sisters, which was the very famous Mario clone available for computers, in the late '80s, which everybody's probably played. Like I played it. You probably you played a game.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
In the series, but you're somebody also Joe. So he's also the mastermind behind the Turican series. Which is another famous shooter series. Turican originally got started on the Commodore 64, but it's got ported into numerous other consoles. Probably most famous Genesis.
Yeah,
I'd say the Genesis version of Turican is probably what most people are most familiar with. So, although Sequel Super Turican was ported to Super NES, well, I'm sure we'll cover that game at some point too. But anyway, So he worked for a company called Rainbow Arts, which was a German developer from 1984. They were quite known back in the 80s and 90s. Most of their work was for computers. So if you were a console guy, you wouldn't have heard of them. But they made very numerous either great original games or ports of games for systems like the C64, the Atari, the PC, etc. So probably best known the Earthworm Jim series. Which was theirs. So eventually Rainbow Arts was purchased by THQ in 1999, and that got merged their German operations. So most of their games are still owned by THQ today. However, back in January of this year, 2022, a company called Ziggurat Interactive purchased more than 80 titles to them, so they have the rights to them now, which will become relevant later on the podcast. So just take a footnote in that acquisition for the time being. But anyway, so the game was developed by Rainbow Arts. Mansford wanted to make a game that was very similar to Turk in some ways, but also expand upon it. So he originally came up with an idea of trying to combine really the easy way to describe this game would be like Turican meets Contra, because half the game is like a typical side-scrolling action game where you're controlling a soldier, in a very like Contra-esque gameplay. The other half of the game, you're flying a ship in a horizontal, like horizontal stages, aka Turican or like the Gradius series. So he was a big fan of Contra as well too. So he wanted to kind of combine the genres. He started working on a game called Targa, spelled Targa, originally designed for like hand-drawn graphics. And he always had the Super NES in mind, like the platform of choice, because by that point, in the early '90s, the consoles were really taking off. They're taking off, like even in Europe. Computers were always like more popular in Europe than consoles, like for a long time, like for numerous reasons. But by the early '90s, system of Super NES started to do very well, especially in Germany, which is a very big gaming market. So he always had like the game in mind with the Super NES. So after working on it, like for a while though, he was inspired by Donkey Kong Country. Flame success that game had to change the graphics to pre-render graphics instead. So Flex the new idea. He also changed the changed the name of the game. I could not find this anywhere confirmed officially, but it sure seems to me that this name of the game now is a kind of an inside joke. As far as the development cycle goes, because it's like Rendering Ranger, like rendering graphics, that kind of stuff. Right. So it does seem like an inside joke that's like, one of those names that probably just like publishers like, okay, like whatever. So, So the game, however, spent several years in development, and by the time it finally was ready for release, late 1995, they could not find a publisher like for the game, unfortunately. So, I think the main reason for that just because that by that point, the 16-bit systems started on their way out. We had covered this a bit before in past podcasts, but like late 95, like when the PlayStation came out, the Saturn came out, there were still many good 16-bit games to come in 96, 97. But by that point, publishers were starting to realize that the 32-bit systems like makes a big thing. Yeah. And even though the plan all along had been for Rendering Ranger R2 to be released worldwide, Rainbow Arts had a very hard time finding a publisher like for the game. They finally signed a deal with Virgin Interactive, ironically enough, which is also a European-only company, to release the game, but in Japan only, because Japan really has some very hardcore shooter fans there. So Rainbow Arts figured that Virgin Interactive figured at least they could, at least sell the game for profit like in Japan, because I don't know. Side note, I don't know if you've seen some of those videos online, Joe, but the Japanese shooter, the Japanese shooter YouTubers who are like really good at the games and whatnot are just insane. Yeah. They're on a whole different level. So as popular shooters are here in the West, they're even more so like in Japan. Yeah, so Virgin Interactive Entertainment, just real quick, was a branch of the obviously the famous large British multi company label Virgin. Their interactive branch was open from was open from 1983 until like 2006. Shut it down. The UK branch was shut down after shut down. The American branch got purchased by Electronic Arts, actually. So, but anyway, so like parts of them are still around today, in like EA Pacific and Westwood Studios and a couple other companies. But yeah, Virgin did publish, but Virgin was primarily a publisher. They published a lot of games like in their label, like original Command and Conquer was originally like a Virgin Interactive release. For Electronic Arts, got the rights for this later on. So anyway, so finally Virgin Interactive was like, okay, we'll take a chance on the Japanese market to release the game over there. But for a very, very, very small print run, definitely one of the smallest print runs that a console game has done, because they only printed 10,000 copies. So that's why this game is one of the most hard to find and therefore expensive games on the system, because of that very small print run. So, however, the game's so well, and the game reviewed pretty well when it came out. The famous Japanese magazine Famitsu gave it a score 22 out of 40, which is like a little bit above average, but still, considering how hard the Japanese people can be on their games,
Right.
It seems like a fair review. So, anyway, yeah. So that's so unfortunate. Unfortunately, he spent all this time and all these years working on this game, kind of like the dream project of his life, with all his previous experience working on games like Turk and other stuff in the past had come out to, and almost nobody got to see it or play it because of that, unfortunately. So
Spoiler, that's about to change in August, and I'm sure you were going to bring that up, but I want to bring it up now before we review the game. But I am excited to see that this is coming to modern consoles, and it looks like that they're not doing anything to polish it up or really anything like that. It's going to be as it was on the Super Famicom, which is nice.
Yes, so just to follow up, like what Joe was saying, that company I mentioned before, Ziggurat Interactive, who bought the rights to many Rainbow Arts games, they announced just last month, as of recording this, June 2022, that they're porting the game to numerous systems, PC, Switch, PS4, and PS5, and they're going so far as to have limited run games, also with they also produce a limited physical release to Super NES as well. I've not seen a release date like this yet. It looks like probably going to be like later on this year.
I'm double checking, but I swore I saw something about sometime in August.
The initial press release the initial press release did not give a release date. It just said coming soon. So maybe it might be out as early as tomorrow, next month in digital form. Because like I said, because like you just said, Joe, they're not doing anything to enhance the game. It probably won't take them too long to get it available for digital platforms.
Yeah.
So possibly as soon as next month.
Yeah, I swore I saw it somewhere, but I'm not seeing it now. So maybe I just made up. I swore I saw something like August, but I could be wrong. But it's coming.
Right.
It's coming, people. That's all that matters.
So I was very pleasantly surprised to see that, and it also kind of made up the fact that we had delayed doing this podcast for so long. I mean, it's like now we actually have some positive news report about it.
Oh,
so
here we go. Limited run games will be in charge of physical editions for the Switch. Oh, and apparently Limited Run is making also any SNES carts of this game as well.
I said that already, yes.
Pre-orders open August 5th, so that's where I saw the date.
Okay.
So pre-orders start in Limited Run games August 5th, so I would assume if Limited Run is taking pre-orders based on the Shredder's Revenge physical pre-order, I'm going to say within a month of that August 5th release date. So I'm going to say probably September sometime, maybe even October.
Sounds about right, yeah. So, hard to say about pricing for this game. I probably would say maybe like $15-20 probably for digitally. So
digitally, I'm going to say it's going to be $19.99.
Could be, yeah, but
makes sense.
So anyway, the game itself, as already mentioned, is it's a combination side scrolling and also side scrolling with Soldier, and also side scrolling with a ship, alternating back and forth between 8 stages. There are other games that do the split. There are other games that do this split gameplay. I just can't think of any examples right now that off the top of my head. So
not a great example, but kind of reminded me of Blaster Master, where you have your side scrolling, and then when you go into the little dungeon area, it's kind of like that overhead. So either way, I mean, there's been a ton of games that have mixed genres and whatnot, and this one does pretty well.
It's also kind of similar to the Guardian Legend. The Guardian Legend has vertical scrolling ship stages, horizontal ones, and the action parts of that game are top down. Top down looks to be side view, right. But yeah. So yeah, that's the basic gameplay. So, speaking about the gameplay, Joe, do you want to talk about the gameplay, like beyond that a little bit, like how the game actually plays?
Yeah, so you got your side-scrolling parts that are very Contra-esque.
Yes. Yeah.
I did put in my notes that this reminded me of Turican before I realized why it would remind me a little bit of Turican. So there's that. That's a nice little funny note.
Very good reason for that, yes.
So you get a space laser. There's a weapon called Gemini. You have a yellow pulse kind of phaser sort of thing. And then you get bombs. I mean, it's a shoot 'em up running gun. I hate saying shoot 'em up running gun because that kind of covers both exactly what this game is with both games play styles. But and that is what it is. Like, you are constantly moving forward to the right of the screen, and preferably you have the spread shot because it's the best one in the game, and you're just blowing everything up until you get to the end where they have these pre-rendered graphic full motion video kind of things. And then you get into your ship and you get to your side-scrolling shoot 'em up. There is not a point in the game where I felt it was too difficult. I felt it was pretty balanced for the most part, but there are times where the bosses are just super easy. And I mean, like, it's one of those, like, pick a corner and just keep firing. Or even in the beginning, there's, like, this, like, big ship that's kind of hovering over you and attacking you and whatnot. And it's like, just point up and shoot the middle section and just keep kind of moving left and right to avoid the bullets and the bombs. And, it goes down pretty quick. And I wasn't expecting, like, super hard, difficult bosses, but at the same time, like, as you get further in the game, you realize how easy some of these are. Like, there's one with, like, there's a huge face, and it's got guns, and, like, at first it's kind of confusing as to how you're supposed to approach this boss. In reality, it's like you shoot at his teeth, and he has a big laser that comes out of his mouth, and you got to just keep, like, shooting into his mouth that way. And then, like, as you take off pieces of the face, it eventually gets weaker and weaker and weaker. So yeah, like, overall, I mean, I'm not gonna say it's forgettable, but it's kind of, run of the mill, run and gun. Like, this is like Contra 101 almost, and it's kind of got it's Gradius, right? Gradius is the one where, like, when you're shooting the ships, you can get the upgrades, and that like, moves on the meter on the bottom. Yeah, so that's what this reminded me of. It was Gradius for the shooters, and it was Contra for the running gun. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just not what I was expecting. I was thinking this was going to be a much more unique experience. And I don't know. Like I said, it was kind of run-of-the-mill, in all honesty. What about you, Greg?
So, I like the game a bit more than you did, I guess, but I do agree with like a lot of what you said. There's not really anything in here, with a few exceptions, which we could talk about here a little bit. There's not really too much here in this game that's really original, because I have the original. Because, like I said, the programmer uses experience, like the Turican series, whatever, to make this game. He's going with the old, if it ain't broke, don't fix it idea. So, like, it's just a very, there's nothing very, like, unique about this game in many ways, but the game itself, I think, is still, like, very solidly put together, like, a very solid. It's still, like, very, like, fun playable game. So, did you actually, like, beat this game?
I did not.
Okay, so I did, and let me comment on, like, the difficulty. The difficulty of this game, yes, does start off, like, very, very easy at first. However, it does ramp up quite a bit as you go through the game, and by the time you reach like, stage 7, it is brutal. The game goes up. The game has a huge difficulty spike in stage 7.
Okay, yeah.
And then
I want to say it was like stage 5 where I was just like, what, I'm kind of done. It's not like it's not like I didn't want to finish it. It's just like I said, it was like kind of run of the mill, and it wasn't like just didn't grab me and bring me in like I thought it would.
Yeah. So like stage 7 is where the game really starts to get difficult, and then you have a boss rush in stage 8, which is almost insane. So the difficulty of this game is very unbalanced. It's one of the definitely things I definitely had the biggest problem with, because the game starts off too easy and ends too difficult. Yeah. There's not very much sweet spot in the difficulty here in this. Having said that, however, this game does have some things going for it. I think the weapons are pretty good mix. Weapons are nice. Nothing wrong with them. There are some nice weapons that you can get. You're basically controlling Rendering Ranger, who's special forces soldier defending Earth against aliens. Rinse, repeat. You've heard this.
Right.
You've heard this plot line before. However, the laser guns that this game does give you are pretty good. This game's also not a one-hit death like Gradius and Contra is. You're able to take 5 hits before you get killed. So that also helps some. Also, you're able to choose the options screen before you start the game how many lives you want, and you can have you can start anywhere from 3 to 7 lives to start off with.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. I totally forgot about that, and also I completely because I did write that in my notes. And the other thing I grazed over that I wanted to mention was you can change the color of your guy, and the color of your guy also coincides with the color of your ship. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, I like customization in the game, especially in an early game like this.
Offsetting all that, however, the fact this game has no continues.
Well, right.
So, there is a code you can use, that eventually the next stage,
right,
which we'll talk about here, at the end. But there is, which is basically stage select, just more like a complicated stage select, because you had to do it over and over and over again. You want to get fit at the game, but so if you're playing the game the first time, definitely taking 7 lives is definitely recommended to you, because this game does require some practice to get to quote get good at it. The average playthrough of this game online is anywhere between an hour to an hour 15 minutes. Typical length for shooter game. So the controls also I thought were I felt like I was worked well, Joe. I'm not sure if you felt the same way.
Yeah,
but,
that's why I said it's kind of run of the mill, and I didn't really focus too much on the controls, because the controls are what you'd expect. Yeah. I don't think they work. You know what I mean? There was no point where I died and I was like, oh, the controls are total crap. This is not my fault. It was totally my fault. Yeah. Every time I died, it was my fault. If you die in this game, it's something that you can prevent in the future with future playthroughs.
Yeah. There's also you also have a lot of customization like this game also, which is very nice, which is also something I think that kind of elevates this a little bit above most of your typical shooters. You are able to aim diagonally without moving, which is nice. By using shorter buttons. The 4 weapons you can get in this game are all upgradable. They all have their unique special attack, and you can also swap them out on the fly. So it's a very good way. This game is very good in letting you find your own playing style as it was.
And that was another thing I put in my notes too. Is power-ups are key. Yeah. And that's never been truer.
So if you get killed, you only the weapons you're using at the time gets reduced to level 1. Your other weapons that you have in storage are storage left them, which is nice, because this game doesn't need power use as much like Gradius does, for example. So it's a nice thing about it. So it's I agree with you, Joe. The fact that this game is not really amazing, but there are enough things this game brings to the table. I think all those things that I just talked about, that kind of make it kind of set it a little bit above and a little bit beyond the other shooters of this time period. I think, I think mostly because this game was so late, '95, the programmer was able to utilize his own experience, the experience of other games that come out before this, to basically say, okay, what worked, what didn't, and kind of bring about the best things to the table.
Yeah, and to be honest, what makes this game the complete package is what we'll probably talk about next. But it's like the graphics. It's what it does visually.
The graphics, yes.
The visual presentation and the sound presentation in this game is really what kind of wraps it up and makes it a complete package.
Well, let's go into those graphics and sound effects then, because those are easily the best things this game's like. I mean, like.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna say a few things, then I'll let you have your moment, Greg. But like, I really kind of like the fact that it's kind of a darker tone. It's not the typical color palette you would see on a Super Nintendo, so that was kind of nice. I think the pre-rendered graphics not only look good then, but I think they still look good. And also, the sound marries everything together. I think if the soundtrack is good, the sound effects are perfect for whatever weapon it is. It just really marries everything together very nicely. And, I say, it's a run-of-the-mill game, and, it kind of is. But the graphics put it over the edge, make it a little bit more above average than an average shooter. And as far as, this is just one of those games, like, you have to play it. Like, this is definitely a recommendation. I'm going to throw that out there right now.
You changing your mind in the game like you're doing the podcast?
No, because, like, I don't absolutely, I don't hate it. And like I said, I enjoyed the time I had with it, and I definitely recommend it. It's just not, like... So when this is released for the Switch and PS5, PS4, whatever, I will probably pick this up digitally. But it's not something I'm going out and buying day one. I'm going to wait for a sale. That being said, if I was a collector, I most certainly would not be picking this game up. But we'll eventually get to that.
Yes. So... Joe definitely hit the highlights here about the graphics. Screenshots do not do this game justice. You really need to see this game in action to really be able to take it in, because the game was delayed to its detriment because the switch from hand-drawn to CG graphics, which you can argue whether or not that should have been done, because I'm sure the game would have looked very gorgeous with hand-drawn graphics anyway, as it was. Right. But having said that, this might be the most visually attractive game on the system, bar none.
Yeah.
These are these are very gorgeous graphics. These are graphics so good that they're so good that when it came out at the time, 1995, some people commented the game looked like a PlayStation or Saturn release, because the graphics, the graphics, they were that good. So, and like Joe said, they still hold up very well today. That said, there is also, so before I get into that, it definitely is a programming. It definitely is a masterpiece of programming here too, because like this is only 16 meg card. Right. It's not like this is not like a huge size card. So for the game to run as smoothly as it does, without any slowdown, without any flicker, looking this gorgeous, with all these like sprites and graphics, enemies on screen. There's one part that's like a massive it's basically a TAT. They're not calling it that, but that's what it is. But to have a boss that size moving around on like a Super NES card so smoothly is just like nothing. You're nothing short of jaw dropping. Having said that, there is a trade-off to this. There's so much going on in this game that it can be very hard to take in the fine details if you're playing the game, and it can also be like, if your eyes also wander over the wrong spot of the screen. Sometimes the effect can be the effect can either be distracting, or possibly depending upon how sensitive you are, make you cross-eyed because there's like so much stuff going on here. It's like they're pushing the system so hard they may have overpushed it like in some ways. Because some of these graphics, while they're gorgeous and very and great to look at, it's very hard to take in the fine detail and appreciate just how beautiful and gorgeous that these graphics are, unless you're actually like watching a video and pausing every now and then to take a look at things like or whatnot. So, like in the heat of action, the heat of gameplay, you're gonna miss most of this fine detail, which is unfortunate because like this game really needs to be seen to be, seen either in action or on a video, like to be believed.
Yeah, agreed.
So yeah. Great graphics. There's a trade-off to it, though, like, unfortunately. But, the sprite work, however, is also, like, very worth mentioning, again, like, its own. Because it's, like, this is, like, stock Super NES hardware. Stock cart, 16-bit cart. And they made this work.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing. It's like, like, there's no way... there's no way people who got the system 4 years earlier when it came out in North America, would have believed this.
Yes, you're absolutely right.
So... the sound effects, like Joe said, are also great. They also work with it. Music, the music of this game is also very good. It's not an amazing soundtrack. It's not quite as good as a soundtrack, like say, like Contra or Gradius, but it is a very good soundtrack. A soundtrack that fits the action very well and just merges very seamlessly, like the sound effects, like the and the on-screen action that's going on. The time you played it. So, like kudos to it for that as well. So that's most of the gameplay here about this game. Like I said before, the game did review the game reviewed pretty well when it came out. Even like modern, more modern reviews have also been pretty favorable about it. Like Nintendo, the online site, like Nintendo Life gave it like a 9 out of 10, for example. They covered this game like a few years ago. And yeah, so, for the most part, I agree with Joe. I think I like this game a bit more than Joe did, but, this is not... This is not an amazing, groundbreaking game, on the system as Gradius or Contra is. In fact, I go as far as to say that Gradius, that Gradius 3 and Contra 3 are probably better than this one as far as gameplay goes. Yeah. That said, it is still a very good game. Anybody who's a shooter fan definitely needs to check this out because this is very, because it was only released in Japan on such a limited run. This game got ignored and missed out by a lot of people over the years. And I am glad this game's being released later on this year, for a more wider market, because I think people are going to be very pleasantly surprised by this. But the game, like I said, the gameplay's not. Like I said, the gameplay's not amazing, but it's solid. And when people see this game that came out in 1995 with graphics like this, they're going to be blown away because it's this is really a more hidden gem in the system. The system as far as that goes. So, I would prefer the gameplay to be a bit more varied. Don't get me wrong, mixing the side-scrolling running gun parts with the side-scrolling ship parts was great. I wish more games did that. But, and there was a lot of fun variety with the weapon angles, the weapons, and then when the weapons and whatnot. But, there wasn't... The gameplay, while solid, didn't really bring anything new to the table. But then again, did it have to bring anything new to the table? Because the main people... Because the biggest thing people are going to be looking at for this... is going to be the graphics. So, really the biggest complaint I have about this game, is the very unbalanced difficulty. The game starts off way too easy and it's way too hard at the end. So, the difficulty could be balanced a bit more, more challenging, and or quote unquote fair. This game would rank a little bit higher for me. That said, it's a very solid game. It's not great, but it's a very solid game for sure. It's definitely well worth playing, especially if you're especially if you're a shooter fan. The shooter fans out there definitely who've not played this game definitely need to get this a look. So. And if you don't want to wait for the game to come out in digital release, there are some ways you can play it. There are some ways they can play it for cheaper than what's going for right now. As far as that goes.
Emulation's still free.
Yep. emulation and also repo
Yep.
cards, which are not that badly priced. So Flex, we'll get into that here in just a moment. So before we move on to Flex, before we move on to get to game codes and eBay, there, Joe. Anything else? Anything else you want? Do anything else you want to plug this game?
No, I think I've pretty much said my piece, and like I said, you should check this game out. It is a marvel of engineering as far as Super Nintendo is concerned. Like I said, it's still holds up visually. The gameplay is, it's. I agree, it's not balanced the way it should be, but also if you want to experience this game, just play the first 2 levels. You're gonna experience your typical run and gun, and it's going to be a little bit breezy, and then you get in your ship, and you get to experience that, and then if you want more, then proceed forward, and good luck to you. But by then, you should already know. You should know after those 2 levels whether this is the kind of game that you're going to play all the way through, or you're not. I wanted to really play through the entire thing, but I started to get frustrated in the 6th level. And it sounds like if I had gone any further, I would have got even more frustrated. So I'm kind of glad where I stopped.
That boss rush in stage 8 is one of the most brutal I've ever gone through. Periods,
yeah.
But
So
the unbound difficulty of this game is definitely the game's your biggest flaw.
yeah, and then that's part of my problem is that I went by my experience with the game, and I should have probably watched a couple speedruns just so I could get an idea of what was after stage 5. You know what I mean? But what I saw was good, and I enjoyed it. And you know what? When this comes out, maybe I'll finally be able to get past level 5 and get into the level 6, 7, and 8 and get to enjoy it a bit more. And maybe I'll feel different. Probably not. But, it's a possibility.
Yeah. Oh, so one of the last things that I wanted to stress, I think I made this clear earlier, but we just want to drive home this point. Like I said, this game was developed by a European company. The plan was for it to be released in Europe and in North America as well as Japan. So the fact it's released only in Japan only was something the developers were not counting upon. Obviously, like spending 3 years or whatever it took to develop this game. The full game's in English. Not, there's not one bit of Japanese like in this game. Even though it's released only in Japan, the entire game is in English. The opening's in English, the ending's in English, all the text on screen is English. It's 100% English. So when this gets released digitally later on this year, they don't have to. They don't even have to worry about that because the whole game's because the whole game doesn't have lick of Japanese in it. So like I said, this game was developed and planned all along for a worldwide release. It's just a shame that it only got released in Japan. So because I think if the game come out here in North America, even though it was late in the Super NES lifestyle, I think it's I think the game would have sold reasonably well. I mean, there's a pretty good shooter. There's a pretty passionate shooter fan base. Try that again. Here in North America, the game's so graphically stunning. I think that alone would have driven most of its sales. So, just unfortunately, the game was delayed for so long that by the time it was ready for release, they couldn't find a publisher for it.
I think another thing that would have probably kicked this game's butt too is that this time, PlayStation, Saturn was starting to come out, and it was all about the 3D graphics. And when anybody said anything about Super Nintendo or anything before that, people were automatically turned off. That's not what's new. That's not what the hot thing. It's not Virtual Fighter. It's not Tekken. It's that sort of mentality that 3D was better. 3D was the future, so forget everything else. I think not only were there some good Super Nintendo games that were forgotten or not appreciated as much in this time period of moving to 32-bit, but there was definitely some Genesis games as well that were just neglected big time.
Yeah, and also the fact that so another game this game also reminded me of that came out even later, was Ian Hander.
Yeah. Yep.
Shot by Square Enix. Well, Square at the time, that Square Enix because that game is also a side-scrolling 2D shooter game, but with with those very gorgeous graphics. And that game's still reasonably well, but so it's like, yeah, go figure. It's hard to explain these things sometimes. Yeah. So
also, go figure. Square Enix making shooter games. What the hell?
Yeah, that was during their experimental time period. They were trying branch out and expand the company beyond just like role playing games.
Oh, believe me, I'm not throwing shade. I mean, what's it called? Egert's, the King of the Ring, or whatever it is, where it was like, it was a fighting game that they created and literally just threw Final Fantasy characters in there so that it would sell.
Then you also had the Bouncer, which is also like a fighting game of sorts.
Yep. So I mean, it's good to see when a company like that will take some chances, kind of branch out.
Right. So, anyway, so hopefully the game will sell well when it comes out re-release later on this year. Like I said, as long as they don't overprice the game, I think the game probably should do pretty well when it comes out.
And you know what? That's a big thing. I think if this game, because I paid $20 for Panzer Dragoon, and that was pretty. I thought that was fair for the game. If this comes out any more than that, I don't see me investing in it until it's on a big sale.
I'd heard Sega was re-releasing Panzer Dragoon for the Switch.
Yeah. And it's actually really good. It wasn't at first.
Does that?
But once it got past.
Does that include both 1 and 2, or are those games being sold separately?
No, so it only includes the first game. I'm hoping down the line, based on the sales of the first one, that we will get the second one and Saga. But the thing with Saga is that their source code is gone. That game is completely gone. Yeah. So I would hope. I know the original creator expressed that he would love to go back and recreate Saga, which is fantastic. But also, he knows that the fan base is there and doesn't want to disappoint by deviating from what the original was. So we'll see.
Yeah, speaking about games unfortunately locked away in the system. This game was locked away in Super NES for the longest time. Panzer Dragoon Saga is locked away in the Saturn.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So, but anyway, well, this game at least seemed light of day sometime soon. So we'll have to wait and see, I guess. But so anyway, stage select code I mentioned, not stage select. This just allows you to advance to the next stage anytime you want to. Just pause the game, then input the code LRBYXA select BYAXRL, and now I'm take you to the next stage. And then you can rinse and repeat. This is as often as you want to go to the end of the game if you wish. So. Despite this game obviously was hard to find on eBay. 13 copies of the game were currently listed as the time of doing research. 10 copies had recently sold. Because of limited sales, I broadened the search parameters this time around to go worldwide. I usually only do North America, but because I knew this game was so rare and I was looking for any possible sales, I expanded it to be worldwide in this case. So most of those sales are repo carts, as I already mentioned. The pricing for repo carts is not that bad, depending upon who made it, where the world it's and where the world's being shipped from. Right. You can get your hands repo cart, and these prices include shipping for anywhere from $16 to $55. So, and there's lots of people who there's lots of people who made up a repo box. You want to sell you both the cart and the box for $50. So, not bad pricing as far as that goes. So, I found one copy of this game that I recently sold on eBay. Of course, it was CIB because, with rare games, you almost always see these games complete because people realize that the value of them, and it's a very, very good copy, very good, very good. It was a very good physical shape copy that sold. The box, manual, and cart were all boxed. Plastic boxed to help to preserve the value. Not graded, just boxed. So just help. You just have to preserve the cost. considering how rare this game is, 10,000 copies, the price wasn't quite as bad as I expected to see it as. Do you have ballpark figures what you think the game you might have sold for, Joe? You having just learned that?
I'm gonna guess somewhere around the $900 mark.
You are exactly right, $900.
Wow.
So, yeah, so it is expensive, and it definitely is one of the, it definitely is one of the most rarest games in the system. But I have seen Super NES games sell for higher prices. So, for example, another very rare Japanese-only Super NES game was a game called Magical Poppin', which I looked at, those examples sold for even more money than this one did. So yeah, expensive, but not like expensive, but not like crazy like expected to see it at. So, but anyway, so that's Rendering Ranger R2 for you. A game on the cover for a long time now. A game I'm glad a game that I'm glad we waited to cover because with the recent announcement to flag out the release of the game coming out shortly. So definitely a very solid shooter that is definitely at least worth checking out for the graphics if nothing else.
Yeah, absolutely.
So very glad this game is going to be no longer exiled to the 10,000 physical copies that came out in Japan in 1995. So I'm curious to see if there's any other games that Zicro is going to be putting out to the time to come since they bought the rights to so much of Rainbow Arts catalog.
Agreed.
So, but anyway, so that's our game for you this time around. Next time around, we're doing a follow-up to a previous podcast. We covered a Mickey Mouse game for Super NES recently. The exact name is escaping me right now.
I mean, it's Mickey Mouse starring Magical Quest starring Mickey Mouse.
Yeah,
is what we covered on the Super Nintendo.
And we mentioned we were going to cover the two sequels to that game, which are again, Joe, please.
The Great Circus Mystery. And then Locked in Japan, Magical Quest 3. Not quite Locked in Japan because there was a GBA port, but I'm sure we'll cover that next week.
Yeah, so since those two games are similar to one another, and since since they are going to be shorter podcasts because they use the same game engine and whatnot as the original game, we said cover both. We said to cover both those games at the same podcast, so stay tuned. Stay tuned to us cover those games next time around on the Super NES podcast. If you have any questions, comments, feedback, etc., you can leave me a post on our Facebook page, or you can also send me an email to the SNES podcast at yahoo.com. Joe, how can they reach you?
You can reach me at JOESUX30. That is on Twitter. And then you can also find me on my very public Facebook. And I just want to say that, technically this is my 2-year anniversary. So, congratulations, me making it this long. This is the longest,
yes, congratulations.
Yeah, this has been the longest, interview, kind of, did you make it sort of thing.
Interview. I'm not sure I've ever heard a podcast, a game podcast to describe that, but okay.
It's been podcast by podcast. I was never officially hired.
Okay, that works.
But yes, it's been a great 2 years, and I've covered so many great games here on the podcast. A couple that have made me frustrated, but I wanted to point out that I could not believe that it's been 2 years, so I wanted to point that out because I really feel like, it was just yesterday that we, got together and we recorded that first episode, which was, Man, Yoshi's Cookie, I think it was. It was something obscure like that we ended up covering.
I don't know if it was the very first game, but it was definitely one of the earliest games that we covered. So,
you know, to go from Yoshi's Cookie to now we're doing one of the rarest Super Famicom games. Just saying, you know, we've covered a lot over the past 2 years.
Well, Yoshi Cookie was the last Nintendo published NES game, so it's like there's kind of a connection there too, kind of.
And most of all, of course, Greg, you know, it's been a pleasure doing this with you, and I look forward to many more years.
Yep, thank you.
We have way too many games that we still have to cover.
Yes, I agree totally. Thank you very much. I feel the same way about you. So glad to glad to have you here, and thank you for being on the podcast with me. You appreciate it a lot. So. Thank you again, everybody, for giving us a few minutes of your day. Stay safe out there. Be well. We'll catch you again next time. Later.
Nintendo controls 80% of the video market. But no matter how you play the game, or which game you play, things definitely have come a long way since Pac-Man.
Now you're playing with power. Deep power.